On the night of our 7th wedding anniversary, I had planned to tell Grant that our love began with a paid fake couple agreement. But before I could say a word, the contract was thrown in front of our 30 guests. My signature, the payment records, and a truncated audio recording were enough to turn our 7-year marriage into a long-running scam. Grant asked me to prove which of our embraces had been genuine, but I took off my wedding ring and walked away from him. Later, he discovered the contract had only lasted 6 months and thought that would be enough to bring me home. But the debt between us that was hardest to repay was never the money. As soon as the lights on the lake came on, Viola had the restaurant ceiling lights turned off. I tucked the folded letter under my napkin, my fingertips still resting on the first line. Grant, 8 years ago, your grandmother paid for me to enter the North Bay Rehabilitation Center. It took me 14 months to write this letter. The first draft was only half a page long. I wrote the second one until the early hours of the morning, and I tore up every draft that followed. Tonight's letter is the first one I've ever brought to Grant. I plan to wait until the guests have left, until he's taken his pain medication, and until we're back sitting in those 2 old chairs on the second-floor terrace before I give it to him. I'm always waiting for a less cruel moment. Viola stood beside the projection screen and raised her glass to the people at the long table. 7 years is quite a milestone, she said. If Eleanor were still here, she would surely want us to remember how this marriage began. Grant was sitting to my right. He was in a lot of pain today. His cane was leaning against the side of his chair, yet his right hand still rested on the back of mine. When he heard my grandmother's name, his thumb twitched slightly. First, our wedding photos appeared on the screen, but the next one wasn't. A scanned document with black text on a white background filled the entire wall. 6-month companionship and rehabilitation support agreement. Party B, Ivy Hart. At the very bottom was my signature. I pushed my chair back, and the silverware clinked softly. Turn it off. No one moved. Leah, who was in charge of the reception's presentation, stood by the wall, looking even more bewildered than I was. Viola didn't look at her, but cast a gaze at me that was so calm it bordered on compassion. Grant has a right to know. You have no right to disclose his rehabilitation records here. I walked toward the control console, and Grant grabbed my wrist. Not tightly, but I stopped. Let it play out, he said. His hand was cold. The next page was the payment summary. The first payment had been transferred to my account the day before my first visit with him. The amount was circled in red. At the far end of the long table, someone set down their glass, and others looked away. No one cursed at me on the spot. That was worse than curses. The people of Belvy Bay were good at keeping their judgments to themselves in silence, only to bring them up the next day at the breakfast table and in work meetings. As the recording played through the speakers, I heard myself from 8 years ago. Stick it out for 6 months, get the full pay. There was a brief cut in the recording at both ends. I recognized that conversation, and I knew what had been edited out. But Grant had already let go of me. He looked at me as if he suddenly didn't recognize the wife who'd been sitting beside him for 7 years. I reached for the letter under the napkin. My fingertips brushed the edge of the paper, then I pulled my hand back. This wasn't a confession. It was an execution. Is the contract real? Grant asked. I looked at him. Yes. He braced himself against the table and stood up. The pain made his right leg falter for a moment. He didn't take the hand I offered, nor did he reach for his cane. Go to the study. Grant, Viola began. Don't let anyone follow us. He finally grabbed his cane, stepped past me, and left the dining room first. As I walked past the screen, I saw Leah unplugging the projector cable. She didn't look at me. 2 of the guests had already picked up their coats, and another was holding a cell phone, the camera pointed downward. Who knows how much they'd recorded. Viola stepped aside to let me through. You should have told him anyway, she whispered. Yes. I pulled the letter out from under my napkin. But it shouldn't have been up to you to tell him like that. The study door closed behind me. Grant stood by the fireplace and placed his phone on the desk. The recording played again. I'll stick it out for 6 months, get my full pay, and we'll be even. Pause. Play again. On the third play, I walked over and pressed pause. I said that. I heard that. But there's more before that. How much? He asked quickly, as if the answer wouldn't hurt as long as the question was specific enough. Grant. How much for the first visit to the rehab center? How much to have dinner with me? And how much to say you were my girlfriend at that charity cocktail party? The contract specifies fixed visits and public appearances, not per instance. So it's a package deal. He gave a soft chuckle. Suddenly, I couldn't go on. Over the past 7 years, I've seen him bite through his lip during a pain flare-up. I've seen him slam his treatment chart on the floor after a 15-meter walking drill, and I've seen him hide in the bathroom after standing up without holding the railing for the first time, refusing to let me see him cry. I've never seen him look at me like that before. What about that first kiss? He asked. Was that included in the service? No. The wedding? No. These past 7 years? No. Do you really think I'd believe that? I clenched the letter so tightly that the edge of the paper cut into the palm of my hand. No matter what I say tonight, you'll only hear the answer you've already decided on. I decided. He took a step closer. Did I sign this thing? Did I take the money? Was I the one lying in the North Bay Rehabilitation Center, needing help even to shower, while you stood by counting down the months I had left? I didn't. A fraud like you has nothing in your eyes but money. A log in the fireplace cracked. I looked down at the wedding ring on my left hand. This ring isn't part of the trust, nor was it a gift from Eleanor. Grant bought it with his first design consulting fee. On the day he proposed, he was so nervous he dropped the box into a crack in the planks at Cedar Pier. He knelt down not to propose, but to retrieve the ring. By then, the contract had ended a year earlier. I slipped the ring off my finger and placed it next to his phone. For a split second, the anger on his face faded. Weren't you going to explain? I was going to. I held up the letter in my hand. Give it to me. No, Avi. You can hate me, you can file for divorce, and you can ask me about everything once you're ready, but you can't first condemn me as a liar for 7 years and then order me to rip my heart open to see if there's anything inside that will appease you. I folded the letter back to its original shape and slipped it into my coat pocket. He stared at that pocket, the veins on the back of his hand taut. So you've chosen to keep secrets after all. Tonight, I've chosen to leave. Half of the bedroom closet belonged to me. I took only the clothes I'd bought before we were married, the trunk my mother had left me, and the old pottery tools stored under the workbench. The lake house is held by the Ver Heritage Trust. The furniture, paintings, and silverware inside were never ours. The items we acquired after our marriage would need to be addressed during mediation, so I photographed each one. I didn't even touch the dark blue lounge chair I'd picked out for Grant. Mara cursed under her breath when she answered the phone, then asked, "Are you safe right now?" "I'm safe." "Did he stop you?" The sound of a cane tapping against the ground came from outside the door. No. Grant stopped at the doorway. He'd already taken his medication, but he still looked terrible. "The driver will take you." I wrapped my mother's unglazed ceramic cup in a sweater and put it in my suitcase. "No need. It's raining outside. I've called a car. A car from the trust is safer than one you've just hailed. I don't want to ride in the Vera's car again." His jaw tightened. "I'm not trying to bribe you. I know, but you're still making arrangements for me to leave you." He didn't say anything else. The headlights cut through the rain and came to a stop on the circular driveway of the lake house. I put my luggage in the trunk and glanced back. Grant was standing on the porch, without an umbrella. I thought I was going to cry, but I just took out my phone, sent a booking request to the Bellevue Private Mediation Center, and snapped another photo of my suitcase and the license plate. Then I got into the car. The lights of the lake house were blurred by the rain into faint golden streaks, quickly disappearing out the rear window. The apartment in the Harbor District wasn't much bigger than the master bedroom walk-in closet at the lake house. But the door lock only worked for me. Mara placed the second-floor key in my hand and handed me a piece of paper listing the rent and utility shares. "It's a friend's rate, but it's not free," she said. "I'm not giving you charity, and you shouldn't punish yourself by pretending to be homeless. I have the money to pay." "I know. Get some sleep first. You can put on a brave face tomorrow." The rain pounded on the roof all night. By dawn, the video of the anniversary dinner had already been shared in the Harbor Pottery Studio members group chat. The footage only showed the projection screen and my profile, but the audio was crystal clear. "Is the contract real?" "It's real." 8 seconds. That was enough. Before 9 a.m., 3 members canceled their classes. A client who's been buying my work for years sent a message saying she wanted to put our collaboration on hold until a personal dispute becomes clearer. Mara flipped her phone face down on the workbench. "We're closing today." "No." I tied on my apron and slammed a lump of clay down in the center of the wheel. "We still have 6 students at 10 o'clock. In the end, 4 showed up. I taught them how to keep their thumbs steady against the inside of the cup's wall, and how to slow down gradually when the wheel was off-center, rather than forcing it back into place. By the end of the class, my fingers were stiff, and my apron was covered in grayish-white clay slurry. A staff member from the mediation center returned my call during their lunch break. Standing in the narrow stairwell by the back door, I laid out my requests one by one. Except for property, documents, and urgent health matters, contact each other only through the mediator. Any private meetings require mutual consent. Stop all non-essential joint credit authorizations, and keep personal accounts separate. Also, since the old contract involves medical privacy, I will not allow any family members to participate in the mediation. The staff member asked, "Do you wish to file for divorce immediately?" I looked down at the alley below, gleaming from the rain. "Let's separate first." After saying that, I added one more thing. "But please send me the documents needed for the divorce proceedings as well." Later, Grant told me he received the limited contact notice that same afternoon. He read it twice in his study at Lake House. The first time, he read the terms. The second time, all he saw was any private meeting requires the explicit consent of both parties. The photo from their 7th wedding anniversary was still on the table, with Ivy's ring weighing down the cell phone. He reached for it, his fingertips brushing the band, then paused. When Viola pushed the door open, he flipped the notice face down on the desk. "I had last night's video taken down," she said, "but private shares can't be fully controlled. The family firm can issue a brief statement." "Who gave you permission to air the contract?" "Eleanor has been dead for 14 months. The confidentiality clause has expired, and Ivy still hasn't told you. How much longer do you think she'll hold out?" Grant didn't answer. The question was too precise as a knife deliberately sharpened to a fine edge. "I want the full contract." "Last night was it?" "Last night was only 3 out of 12 pages. I want the original, all payment records, renewal records, and the raw audio file of the recording you played." Viola looked at him for a moment. "You're making excuses for her." "I'm looking for the facts." The Ver family law firm was located in a low stone building on the north side of the Lake Estate. When Grant arrived, Irving Mercer had already placed a file request form on the conference table. The payment summary Viola brought was thin. For the first 6 months, there was a fixed monthly payment. The last column was cut off at the bottom of the page, so the subsequent account status was invisible. "She may also have benefited in other ways," Viola said. "The marriage itself is the greatest benefit." "That's your judgment, not a fact in the record," Owen said. He pushed the first page of the contract and the registration page toward Grant. "Documents directly related to Grant himself can be requested, but the medical attachments require authorization for review. Retrieving the complete records will take time. What we can confirm at this time is that the agreement term was 6 months. There is no record of renewal in the system." Grant's hand hovered over the termination date. October 31st, 8 years ago. His first kiss with Ivy was on November 12th. He remembered it so clearly because that was the day the first snow fell in North Bay. Ivy had asked him in the parking lot if he wanted to go with her to Cedar Pier. No appointment, no family driver, and no one knew. "No renewal?" he asked. Owen replied, "None on record." Viola placed her hand over the summary. 6 months is enough for a trained person to develop a dependency. Grant looked up. "I'm not the kind of person who falls in love with whoever trains me." "Then why were you so angry last night?" He couldn't answer. Owen pushed the application form forward 2 centimeters. "If you want a complete record, please sign here. The outcome won't judge anyone's feelings, it will only verify the time and the documents." Grant signed. As he walked out of the office, he sent the mediator his first request for a meeting. In the reason field, he wrote, "To provide information on the contract term and discuss housing and property arrangements." He had originally wanted to write apology. But an apology isn't an arrangement, and he didn't know where to put it. 2 days later, I ran into Grant in the communal coffee area downstairs at Harbor Apartments. The mediator had given us 40 minutes. He looked even more exhausted than he had on our 7th anniversary. His cane rested beside his right leg, and 3 folders lay in front of him. He didn't pull out a chair for me or touch me. He was as polite as a client meeting for the first time. "The lease is only for 6 months, he said. "I know. It won't be renewed." "I know that, too." He slid the termination page across the table. "Why didn't you tell me?" "I'll explain during the formal mediation." "Abby, I'm not here to interrogate you." I glanced at the 3 folders. "Then what are these?" He opened the first one. Inside was a set of documents for an accessible apartment on the South Bank, owned by a company in his personal name and unrelated to the trust. "You can live here. There's no time limit." The second document is a proposal for the division of community property outside of the lake house, and the third is an independent living account. "I'll transfer a sufficient lump sum into it, with no confidentiality conditions attached." I closed the files. "I won't accept it." "You haven't even looked at the amount." "That's exactly the problem. You found out the contract had ended, so you thought that by giving me a nicer apartment and more money, you could make up for that night. This is compensation. Do you still think I can be bought with money?" His expression changed. "I've never thought that. The first time you came to see me, you brought a house. You lived above the studio. Those videos cost you clients. So you want to restore my old life? I want you to be safe." "Grant, I didn't leave Lake House because it wasn't safe. I left because you used the thing I'm most ashamed of to invalidate every choice I'd made over the past 7 years." His Adam's apple bobbed. "If the last 7 years weren't a contract, why didn't you come back?" I looked at him. "Because I loved you, and I deceived you. Both are true. You've uncovered the first, but that won't make the second disappear. I've hurt you, but that doesn't give you the right to destroy me in front of 30 people." He gripped the edge of the folder. "I can set the record straight publicly. You don't even have the full facts right now." "Then tell me." "Not today." I pushed the property documents back across the desk, leaving only a copy of the contract termination page. "I'll say what I need to say during mediation. I don't want any extra compensation, and I won't give up what's legally mine." He looked up at me, seemingly taken aback by that last remark. I stood up. You have 10 minutes left, he said. That's enough. I just want to know, 6 months from now. Love isn't a date on a receipt. I picked up my coat. If all you want is to find a date to prove I've been innocent ever since that day, you'll never truly see what I did wrong or what you did yourself. Before the door closed, I saw him still sitting where he'd been. 3 documents lay neatly on the desk, not a single one of which had resolved what he'd set out to resolve. It wasn't until long after our divorce that Grant told me that, following that meeting, he had gone to the North Bay Rehabilitation Center. He'd signed an authorization in advance to access only appointment and visitor logs, no treatment records. Jonah Reed met him in the reception area. His hair was half as white as it had been 8 years earlier, and he still wouldn't say a word more than necessary. What do you want me to prove? Jonah asked. When she stopped coming for the contract. That's a matter for the records. Did she love me back then? That's not within the scope of my professional judgment. Grant stared at the visitor log on the desk. During the term of the contract, Ivy showed up every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday afternoon. It was almost unbearably regular, but there were a few lines at the back of the log with no corresponding appointment numbers. June 18th, 9:40 p.m. July 2nd, 6:12 a.m. October 29th, 1:05 a.m. It was a night of torrential rain. Grant remembered having a huge fight with his grandmother, unplugging the call button in the hospital room, and chasing everyone out. Ivy left too. He thought she wouldn't come back, but after midnight, the hospital room door opened again. Her pant legs were soaked, her hair clung to the sides of her face, and all she held was a box of cookies from the vending machine. She sat in the chair farthest from the bed and said, I'm not here to talk you out of it. If you want me to leave, I'll leave, but you have to say it yourself. He didn't say anything. Does this time count toward the contract? Grant asked. Jonah flipped the visitor log back to the front. It's not part of the appointment time slot. As for how she settles things with your grandmother, I don't know. Why did she come back? You're asking me another question I can't answer. Grant put the form away. Jonah suddenly said, in your memory, was Ivy very obedient? She was very patient. I asked if she was obedient. Grant fell silent. When he refused to train, Ivy would put the protective gear back in the cabinet and walk away. She would interrupt family members outright when they answered for him, and because he deliberately poured out his medicine, she wouldn't bring him any sweets for 2 days. She was never a well-trained, perpetually gentle companion. She often made me angry, he said. Jonah nodded. At least that's what you remember yourself, you don't need me to confirm it. Before leaving, Grant submitted a supplementary request to review the payment ledgers. Viola was waiting for him at the lake house. On the table in the breakfast room lay a draft of a public statement titled, Statement Regarding Mr. Grant Veer's Marital Deception. The text portrayed him as a victim who had been carefully selected and exploited over a long period while severely injured, and stated that the Veer family would take all necessary measures to protect the beneficiary and the trust's reputation. Grant turned to the last page. I'm not signing this. You need to take a clear stance. Clear doesn't mean untrue. Which part is untrue? We don't have the complete records yet, nor do we have the original audio files. Viola picked up her teacup. So Ivy led you to believe that, after the first 6 months, she suddenly became a different person. She didn't lead me to believe anything. Of course not. Silence is her most effective tactic. That was true, too. Grant placed the statement back on the table. A 7-day suspension. The honor clause requires trustees to control risks in a timely manner. The clause also requires keeping written records and submitting them for review. You can issue it now and file my objection along with it. Viola looked at him for a long time. Do you think you could handle losing Lake House? Grant's right leg was throbbing in waves of pain. The bathrooms, ramps, and kitchen at Lake House had all been modified to accommodate his physical condition, and even the floor level of his study had been adjusted. He knew how easy it was to live there, and he knew why Viola had chosen this moment to remind him. 7 days, he said. She didn't agree. But the next day, the statement wasn't released. The first formal mediation session was scheduled for that Thursday. I arrived half an hour before Grant to go over the asset list with my own advisor. Premarital assets would remain separate, while joint savings, returns on our apartment investment, and the family projects I helped manage would be divided fairly. The lake house had never been on the list to begin with. The Ver family law firm forwarded an additional settlement proposal through Grant. The amount was enough for me to buy the entire Harbor Pottery studio. The condition was not confidentiality, but only that I acknowledge that my subsequent marriage had a causal relationship with the original agreement. I pulled that page out. Rejected. My advisor asked, are you sure? This doesn't affect your claim to joint property. Precisely because it doesn't affect it, I'm rejecting it. Grant walked into the mediation room just as he heard that last sentence. He sat down on the other side of the long table. The mediator reminded us that this session only addresses issues voluntarily brought forward by both parties. It does not determine whether we should reconcile, nor does it require either party to accept gifts or private explanations. I handed over the asset list, my personal account records, and the photos of our joint property taken before I left on our anniversary. I'm requesting that we revoke each other's emergency financial authorization, I said. I'm also temporarily changing my medical emergency contact. Our respective daily expenses will no longer go through the joint account. Grant's hand holding the pen paused for a moment. In our second year of marriage, he had leg surgery. I signed the hospital deposit and insurance authorization forms for him. Since then, we've maintained emergency access to each other's accounts. It used to be a matter of trust, but now it feels like a door left ajar. Agreed, he said. Joint assets will be handled according to the existing prenuptial agreement. I won't give up my share, nor will I accept any additional settlement. He looked up. Why won't you accept it? Because that's not a division of assets, it's buying a story. I didn't write that proposal. But it came through you. Grant pulled the addendum toward him, read it, and wrote rejected directly at the top of the page before signing it. Withdrawn, he said. The mediator took the page away. That was the first time he hadn't asked me when I was coming home. After the mediation ended, I returned to my studio. A large bouquet of white roses sat next to the turntable. The petals were so fresh they looked as if they'd just been taken out of cold storage. The florist was still waiting for me to sign for it. Who let you in? Mara asked. The student at the back door said you were a friend of the shop owner. The card was in Grant's handwriting. I didn't know how to apologize, but I remembered that you'd held white roses on your wedding day. Next to the bouquet was a narrow box containing my wedding ring. I read the card twice. Send it back, I said. The flower delivery person looked a bit flustered. The flowers are all ready. The flowers can be sent to the community dining hall. Please return the ring the way it came, or hand it over to the mediation center. Mara waited until the door closed before asking, don't you like them? I hate white roses. He doesn't know? Viola arranged the wedding. Mara picked up the dishcloth and wiped the already spotless tabletop, stroke by stroke. So do you know what he doesn't like? Of course I do. He doesn't like the sharp clink of a glass against the stone countertop. He doesn't like it when someone touches his right shoulder from behind. He doesn't like being asked if he needs to lie down when his pain flares up. And he doesn't like anyone opening doors for him unless he asks first. That's not fair, I said. It isn't fair. You've taken care of him for 7 years, and he doesn't even know what kind of flowers you don't like. Mara tossed the dishcloth into the sink. But there's something else that isn't fair. 14 months after Eleanor died, you can say it now. I bent down to pinch a piece of cracked clay. I know. You're always saying you're waiting for the right moment. What moment? A moment when I won't lose him. Mara didn't smile. That's not the right moment, Ivy. That's a guarantee. Honesty has never been a guarantee. The clay split in two in my hands. I didn't argue. The confidentiality clause had been in place for over 6 years. It prohibited me from voluntarily disclosing the agreement, as it included details of Grant's most difficult period of recovery. After Eleanor's death, the clause automatically expired. On the first day, I wrote a letter. On the third day, I deleted it. A month later, I decided to wait until Grant finished the adaptive housing project he was working on. Then came his birthday, the Christmas holidays, the anniversary of my mother's death, and a winter when his pain was at its worst. Every reason sounded like love. 14 months strung together, and all that remained was fear. I picked up a pen and wrote on the back of an order form in my studio. I was bound by the confidentiality clause for the first 6 years. I wasn't during the last 14 months. I was afraid of losing my marriage, so I continued to take away Grant's right to choose the truth. I take responsibility for that. Just as I wrote the last word, there was a knock at the door. Leah Veer was standing outside. Mara stood in the doorway, arms crossed. The studio is closed. I'm here to see Ivy. Please make an appointment for private mediation. Leah's face flushed slightly, but she kept looking at me. I'll ask just one question. Did you plan to marry into the Veer family from the very beginning? I walked to the doorway but didn't let her in. No. Then why did you sign the contract? Because my mother's long-term care loan was secured against our shared cottage. Eleanor offered a 6-month agreement. The advance payment would let me keep the property. So it was still about the money. At first, yes. She clearly hadn't expected me to admit it so quickly. And then? Then I fell in love with him. I ended the contract and kept it a secret. Do you have proof? Yes, but I'm not going to show you Grant's private documents right here at the studio entrance, nor am I going to ask you to take my word for it. If you're working on a family statement, you can contact both parties' advisors. Leah stared at the mud stains on my apron. Do you know how the statement will portray you? I have a general idea. Don't you want me to take your side? I want you to stop siding with half-truths. As for me, I don't need you to take my side right now. Mara tapped lightly on the doorframe twice. That's all the questions. Before leaving, Leah glanced back at the bouquet of white roses in the studio, waiting to be sent away. She didn't apologize. Leah wrote all this down later during the review. That night, she reopened the playlist for the anniversary banquet. The file size of the originally scheduled commemorative video was 472 terabytes. 19 minutes before the banquet began, the file was replaced with a new version of 481 terabytes. The account used for the operation belonged to Viola. Leah saved both playlists but didn't send them to anyone right away. Meanwhile, Grant was searching his study for the returned ring. The florist had delivered the ring to the mediation center instead of returning it to Lake Manor. He rummaged through his drawers but found only a payment receipt from 8 years ago. It was tucked inside a yearbook on accessible design, the paper already yellowed. The payer was an administrative account in Eleanor's name. The payee's name was obscured by a crease, revealing only Hart and the date. Grant sat on the carpet, recalling the afternoon before the proposal. He had seen the slip of paper before. At the time, Ivy was preparing to move out of her rental apartment near North Bay. He had spotted the receipt on her desk and taken it to ask Eleanor about it. His grandmother simply said, "I helped her settle some family debts. That girl doesn't like to owe anyone a favor, don't push her." He asked, "Does this have anything to do with me?" Eleanor looked at him and asked in return, "If it does, what are you going to do about it?" From across the hallway, he could just see Ivy packing the last book into a cardboard box. He didn't ask any further. 2 weeks later, he proposed to her. Grant had always thought he knew nothing about it. It turned out he wasn't. He had merely come across a clue that might jeopardize their happiness and had tucked it back into the book himself. The next day, he handed the evidence to his attorney, requesting that it be included in the mediation materials. "This works against you," his attorney warned. "I know. You could also wait for the official records to be released before determining whether it's the same payment. If it isn't, we can withdraw it later. For now, let's disclose it." He sat outside the counseling office for 20 minutes before going in. During the first session, he didn't talk about why Iway had lied to him. He said, "I probably knew something was off a long time ago. I'd rather she stay than ask." At the next mediation session, "I saw that old receipt on the table." Grant didn't beat around the bush. "I'd seen it before you proposed." I finished reading his written statement and looked up. "You knew?" "Not everything, but I asked Grandma." She dodged the question, and I didn't press her. "Why?" "Because you were packing your things at the time. I was afraid the answer would make you leave." I suddenly felt like laughing. Not because I found it funny. It was because that line sounded all too familiar. "So you waited 7 years?" I asked. "I forgot about it." "No, you tucked it away in a book you'd never open again." He didn't deny it. The mediator shifted the water glass on the table to the side, making room for our silence. "Have you been waiting for me to expose myself?" I asked. "No. Then why, the moment you saw the contract on our anniversary, did you immediately believe everything was a lie? Because you'd already kept a knife in your heart all along, but refused to admit it was there." Grant gripped the handle of his cane. "Maybe." His admission made me even angrier. If he'd said no, I could have kept accusing him, but by saying maybe, it was as if he'd laid everything we'd each been hiding for 7 years out on the table. "What about you?" he asked. "Why didn't you say anything after the confidentiality agreement expired?" "Because I was afraid the answer would make you leave, too. We're so ridiculous." "No, we're cowards." He looked down at the receipt. "When exactly did you stop doing this just for the money?" "I don't know." "That stormy night when you first returned to the rehab center?" "I don't know." "Cedar Pier?" "Grant, love isn't a date on a receipt." "I need to know." "You need a date to put a price on who I was before that day and absolve me of who I've been since. But I'm not that neat." I took the termination email and the wire transfer receipt out of the folder and handed them to the mediator. I'd sent the email to Eleanor 2 days before the contract ended. I requested early termination and a refund for the portion of the contract that hadn't been fulfilled yet. Attached was also the notice that the extension on the cottage mortgage had failed. Grant looked through the pages one by one. "You knew you'd lose the cottage, why did you terminate the contract?" "Because you asked me at Cedar Pier if I wanted to actually go on a date with you." His hand paused. "I don't want to answer that while holding on to that money." "So that day?" "The fact that I chose to terminate the contract that day doesn't mean I became innocent from that moment on. Over the next 7 years, I had the chance every single day to tell you where we started. I didn't." Grant closed his eyes briefly. "Those words I said at the dinner. You don't have to apologize right now." "Why?" "Because you're still using these documents to prove I should come back." "I'm not." I looked at him. He paused for a long time, then corrected himself. "Maybe I am." By the time the mediation ended, the facts were much clearer than they had been at the start. Yet it didn't bring us any closer. That night, for the first time, Grant changed the emergency contact for the lake house from Avi to the professional care service. When the confirmation page popped up, he stared at my name, the pain making it almost impossible for him to sit still. He pressed confirm anyway. Meanwhile, I returned to my apartment and pulled out the letter I hadn't been able to hand over on our anniversary night from the bottom of the drawer. I didn't tear it up. Nor did I mail it. My 29th birthday fell on a rainy Monday. It was also the 8th anniversary of my mother's death. I didn't tell the students at the studio, but during lunch break, Mara brought over a terribly lopsided chocolate cake. I didn't make it, she said. Then why is it so lopsided? I personally picked the one that looked most like a handmade cake from the clearance bin. I laughed for a few seconds, then tears fell unexpectedly onto the paper plate. Mara didn't hug me, she just handed me a small knife. Cut the cake. Crying won't keep me from my 3 o'clock class. The unglazed clay cup my mother left behind sat on the windowsill. She'd shaped the cup when her illness was at its worst, saying we'd glaze it together in the spring. But then the loan statements and funeral notices arrived first, and the cup has remained a dry, gray color ever since. Every year on my birthday, I take it out and put it back. Grant once asked why I didn't celebrate my birthday. I told him I didn't like a fuss, so for the next 7 years he turned down all parties on my behalf, though he never asked why. That morning, he had originally arranged for a bouquet of white roses. He cancelled the order before the florist confirmed delivery. He sent Mara a stiffly worded email, first asking if he could learn about my private dietary restrictions and birthday traditions. Mara replied with just one sentence, "Your wife's private life isn't a multiple-choice question. If you want to know, wait until she's willing to tell you herself." Grant didn't ask again. That afternoon, the mediation center forwarded a non-emotional matter. He was willing to return a batch of my pottery books and tools, along with an itemized list, and asked me to choose a time and method for pickup. I checked the box for, after the studio closes, have the movers leave them at the back door, my presence is not required. At 7 p.m., the boxes arrived right on time. No flowers, no card, no "let's meet up while you're here." Tucked inside the top pottery book was a ticket to an exhibition of my mother's old works. Grant didn't leave a note, he probably didn't even know what that day meant. Yet I sat on the steps by the back door, looking at that ticket and crying for a long time. It turns out that not being disturbed can also be a form of care. The next day, Leah contacted Owen and submitted the playlist for the banquet and the file modification log. Owen merely acknowledged receipt without comment. Extracting the complete recording required verifying the original storage location. The version Viola provided was 1 minute and 17 seconds long, exported 1 hour before the banquet. In the old commemorative footage Leah had saved, however, the file modification time was still from a week earlier. "Did you know Auntie replaced the content?" Grant asked her. They met on a bench outside the law firm. Leah kept clutching her car keys. "I knew she said she wanted to add some old footage of Grandma. I didn't know it was the contract." "What about the recording?" "She had me copy it from the archive drive. I didn't listen to it." Grant didn't go easy on her. "You handed over your private files to her to include in the anniversary video." Leah looked up. "Yes, I did." "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because I went to see Ivy. I thought she'd cry, give me a stack of documents, and beg me to come home and testify on her behalf. She didn't." "That doesn't prove she didn't lie to me." "She admitted she lied to you herself." Leah put the keys in her pocket. "But the statement Auntie prepared didn't mention the 6-month contract or the confidentiality clause. She described your recovery in great detail, yet claimed it was to protect you. I'm starting to wonder whether she's trying to protect you or her own right to speak on your behalf." Owen delivered the second batch of files 2 days later. The complete payment ledger confirmed my refund. The original recording was also found. 8 years ago, I said to Eleanor in the hallway of the family law firm, "If I stick it out for 6 months and get my full fee, we're even. But what if I decide I don't want to do this anymore partway through?" Eleanor replied, "You can terminate the contract and return the remaining funds. Even if Grant has gotten used to me. Especially then. I won't let him become dependent on someone who's just acting for money." The version that was publicly aired cut out my question and Eleanor's response. After hearing this, Grant didn't come to see me right away. He first sent a written correction to each guest from that evening, explaining that the contract lasted only 6 months, the recording had been edited, and there were no contractual payments made after the wedding. At the same time, he did not claim I was completely innocent, nor did he publicly disclose details about visitors to the rehabilitation center. At the end, he wrote, "I publicly used derogatory language without verifying the facts, the responsibility lies with me." This correction was sent only to the guests present that evening and was not posted on social media. He left it up to me to decide whether to make it public. I didn't reply. A few fewer people canceled their classes at the studio, and 2 members returned. Some also said that since I hadn't received any money after the wedding, the matter was resolved. But my petition for divorce was officially filed that same day. Mara saw the confirmation email and was silent for half a minute. "You still love him?" "Yes." "Then why are you getting a divorce?" I placed my mother's ceramic cup on the potter's wheel and smoothed the rim for the first time. Because even when I loved him, I was always playing the role of the most useful person, remembering his medication, arranging his schedule, turning down invitations on his behalf, guessing when he'd be in pain. As long as I kept taking care of him, I could tell myself that my staying was worthwhile. What about him? He loved me, too, but he got used to me knowing first, handling things first, and giving in first. He didn't even know I hated white roses. Mara tapped the ceramic cup with her finger. Will getting a divorce fix this? No, but it can bring the old marriage to an end. A week later, I requested a private meeting. The location was still at the mediation center. Without our counselors present, only the staff remained in the next room. I placed the letter from our anniversary night in front of Grant. You can read it. He didn't open it right away. Why now? Because the recording is complete. Because I don't want this letter to become evidence to prove my innocence. And because the divorce petition has already been filed, it can't be used to stop me. His finger pressed against the edge of the envelope. Have you made up your mind? Yes. Even if I find out everything. Finding out the truth isn't a defense against the divorce. He looked down and opened the letter. There wasn't a single line inside that said, I've loved you from day one. I wrote about the first time I visited him, how I sat in the parking lot for 20 minutes before I dared to go inside. I wrote about how I accepted the money, about my mother's loan, and about that night of torrential rain when I'd clearly finished that week's visit but turned my car around after driving away. I wrote, I don't know on which day I began to love you. Maybe it was the first time you refused to let Viola answer for you, or maybe it was when you picked up the shattered therapy cup and apologized to the cleaning staff. Maybe it was even later. But on October 29th, I decided to terminate the contract. On November 12th, I went to Cedar Pier as Ivy Hart. What I regret most about you isn't being sent to stand before you. Back then, I was poor, afraid, and didn't even know you yet. What I regret most is that, even after getting to know you, I chose time and again to keep you in the dark. The letter concluded. I was going to tell you all of this tonight. I hope you can forgive me, but I know I have no right to decide that for you. Grant read it for a long time. 14 months, he said. Yes. You've been preparing for 14 months. And running away for 14 months. He put the letter back on the desk without touching me. I really want to say I forgive you. But you haven't. I don't know. That's the truth. When he looked up, his eyes were red. I didn't know what I was saying that night either. You did. You chose the words that would hurt me the most. Yes. You don't have to use losing control to excuse yourself. Okay. Every time he admitted something, the defenses in my heart loosened a little. But loosening isn't the same as mending. By the end of our session, it was pouring rain outside. My car had broken down, Mara was in class, and the ride I'd called wouldn't arrive for another 40 minutes. Grant stood at the other end of the foyer and asked, Would you like me to drive you home? If not, I can wait for your ride, but I won't come near you. I watched the rain outside the glass door. Drive me home. We didn't talk about marriage on the way. He asked if the studio roof was leaking, and I told him water pooled at the corner of the staircase. I asked how his leg was doing lately, and he paused, saying only that he already had a professional caregiver. That statement both reassured and saddened me. The car pulled up in front of the Harbor District Apartments. The rain hadn't let up. Thanks, I said. He handed me the umbrella but didn't get out of the car. I took 2 steps forward, then turned back. Grant. He rolled down the window. I leaned over and hugged him. Just a brief hug. My hands didn't reach for the place where he needed support most when he was in pain, and he didn't pull me close. This doesn't mean I'm withdrawing the divorce, I said. I know. He replied too quickly. As I straightened up, he added, Avi, go home. Rainwater trickled down the edge of the umbrella and onto the car window. What? The lake house. You don't need to take care of me. I can change all the access permissions. Your studio will stay just as it is. We can start over. In the same house, continuing the same marriage? We already know where the problem lies. Do you think knowing is the same as fixing it? At least give me a chance. I already did. You mistook a hug for coming home. Grant reached for the car door, then paused. I'm not ordering you. But you still think the end goal is for me to come back to your place. The room's reserved for me, the money's ready. You say you don't need me to take care of you. You've taken care of all the arrangements, just waiting for me to say yes. Then what do you want me to do? I don't know. Maybe start by learning not to turn every moment of closeness into possession. I set the umbrella by the car door. Take it back. It's raining outside. This is my rain. I turned and ran into the apartment. That night, I withdrew my request for our next private meeting, keeping only the discussions on divorce and property division. We just found a small point of common ground, but Grant pushed it away again with a single go home. Viola didn't waste this opportunity. When the 7-day cooling-off period ended, she submitted a reputational risk report to the co-trustees of the trust, recommending that Grant's non-essential distributions be suspended and that a review of his residency permit for the lake house be initiated. She also sent me a private agreement. If I publicly acknowledged that I had initially approached Grant for financial gain and promised not to raise privacy objections against the Ver family law firm, she would refrain from pushing for further statements against me. I forwarded the email to my advisor and replied with just one sentence, "Please contact me through official channels in the future." The next day, another audio clip surfaced in social circles. It was a recording of me in the study on the anniversary night saying, "I won't continue explaining tonight," followed by Grant's remark, "So you still choose to keep it a secret?" The headline read, "Paid wife refuses to give victims an account." This time, the fallout wasn't limited to the Ver family's acquaintances. A community collaboration event at Harbor Pottery Studio was postponed, and 6 members cancelled their renewals. Mara laid the business ledger on the table. She didn't say it was okay. "At current numbers, we'll last 3 months, she said. "I can put my teaching salary on hold." "No, Mara, here you go again, proving you're worth keeping by making sacrifices." She pushed a rent receipt toward me. "You'll pay rent as usual and get your salary as usual. We'll cut back on the evening lighting and postpone buying a new kiln. If things still aren't working after 3 months, we'll make a decision then." I looked at the ledger. "I'm sorry. That's a good line. What's next?" I submitted my full statement. It was neither a rebuttal nor a plea for public forgiveness. I acknowledged the payments, the contract, and my 14 months of willful concealment. I explained the terms of the agreement, the refund, and the edited audio clip, and I demanded a halt to the dissemination of material involving Grant's rehabilitation privacy. The advisor asked if I wanted to emphasize that I had returned without compensation on that stormy night. "No, that works in your favor. That's his medical history, not my character reference." The statement was sent to affected studio partners, guests from that evening, and the trust review contact. It was not publicly disseminated. Viola arrived at the studio that afternoon. She wore gloves and stood in front of a row of unfired cups, touching nothing. "You're better at using procedures than I thought," she said. "You taught me that. You've always said the program is important. The program protects order. Complete documentation is also order." She looked at my mother's unglazed clay cup. "Grant needs the lake house. You know about his chronic pain, and you know what moving would entail. If you keep pushing for the review, he'll make a decision that harms himself just to prove he isn't a victim. I'm not the one pushing for the review. But you can him to stop. I won't make decisions for him anymore." Viola's tone softened. "You've taken care of him for 7 years. Now, to preserve your own dignity, are you prepared to watch him lose the home that suits him best?" That remark nearly struck my most familiar weakness. I gripped the edge of the workbench and didn't touch my phone. If you truly care about his well-being, you shouldn't make housing a condition of compliance. In the real world, resources come with conditions. Then he has the right to decide whether the trade-off is worth it. You know exactly what he'll choose. I don't know. I walked over and opened the door. I used to think I knew. That was the problem. After Viola left, I stood at the sink for a long time. I didn't call Grant. This time, I wouldn't make arrangements for him, nor would I sacrifice myself for him. All Grant received from the mediator was a single sentence: "Abby refuses to intervene privately in your trust decisions." He stared at that sentence for a full minute. Then he picked up his cane and went to the Ver law firm. I wasn't there when these events unfolded. Later, I learned from the review materials that Grant did not ask Viola to withdraw her appeal of the residence permit. He submitted 3 documents. The first was a voluntary waiver of her residence permit for the lake house. The second was a waiver of her discretionary living allowance from the Ver Heritage Trust for the next 5 years. The third was a request for the co-trustees and external records consultant to review the use of the anniversary banquet archives, audio clips, and subsequent privacy disclosures. Viola read only the first page before placing the documents back on the table. "You're using your own body to take revenge on the family. I've already rented an accessible apartment." "Which one?" "This is my private address. The lake house has everything you need. Because everything you control is kept here." Viola's expression remained unchanged, but her voice grew increasingly formal. "As a trustee, I am obligated to remind you that waiving your rights is not automatically reversible. You may lose your housing, your allowance, your activity budget, and the administrative support provided by the family office. I have an income from my job, personal savings, and the means to hire someone to handle administrative matters. Abby won't come back just because you move into a regular apartment." "I know." This was the first time he had made it clear, before paying the price, that the cost wouldn't bring me back. "Then why are you doing this?" Grant placed his hand on the top review application. "Because you used my home to force me to accept the truth you wrote for me. Even if Ivy never comes back, I can't let this continue." Owen sat at the other end of the conference table, checking the document numbers page by page. "Please confirm," he said, "that you're not requesting a review of whether Ivy committed marital infidelity, but rather of the use and disclosure of the confidential records." "Confirmed." "Are you requesting that all files be made public immediately?" No, the medical records will remain confidential and will only be submitted to the review committee. Owen made a note of it. Viola looked at Grant. Eleanor hired someone to deceive you, and I exposed it. Yet you're the one reviewing me. You informed me of the contract's existence, there's nothing wrong with that. She didn't seem to expect him to answer that way. What's wrong is that you chose the version that would give you the most control over me. You didn't hand me the truth, you circulated it among 30 people and then gave me a copy of the conclusion you'd already written. Viola's fingers pressed against the edge of the table. I protected this family for 30 years. Then you of all people should know that power cannot go unchecked simply because it's intended to protect. He signed the last page and handed the pen to Owen. The Lake Manor residency permit would expire in 30 days. That afternoon, Grant moved out the first box of personal documents. He didn't tell me. At 7 p.m., the Ver law firm was scheduled to release a unilateral statement. Grant issued his own public statement an hour before theirs. The statement was signed by him personally, it bore no trust letterhead, nor did he ask me to review it. He said the agreement from 8 years ago was genuine, and that I had accepted 6 months' compensation as his public partner without informing him. He said this constituted harm to his informed choice, and that subsequent true love could not erase it. He also said the agreement did not require intimacy or marriage, there was no renewal, and I returned the unearned portion before the term expired. During our 7 years of marriage, there were no contractual payments from the family. Finally, he made public the part that was most damaging to himself. Before the proposal, he had seen evidence of payments but, out of fear, did not ask about them. On our anniversary, without verifying all the details, he humiliated me in front of our guests. Afterward, he tried to use housing, money, and marriage arrangements to pressure me into returning to my old life. Ivy is responsible for her own concealments. I am responsible for what I've said, what I've done, and the questions I've chosen to avoid. Please stop using my recovery journey as a tool to attack her or protect myself. Our divorce is a matter between us, I don't need any family statements to define me. At the end of the statement, he announced that he was waiving his right to the lake house lease and discretionary allocation, and had applied for an independent trustee review. There was no apology video, no waiting for me outside the studio, and not a single word like, I hope my wife will change her mind after seeing this. When he posted it, I was washing aprons for the children's class. It was Mara who handed me the phone. I put it down halfway through. He's moved out of the lake house, Mara said. I saw that. Do you want to call him? No. I hung the last apron on the drying rack. A few minutes later, I picked up the phone again and read it from the beginning. This time, I read it all the way to the end. He didn't declare me innocent. Nor did he ask me to respond by taking responsibility. That evening, the mediator forwarded a letter containing just 2 sentences. Avi, I've found suitable housing and independent care arrangements. You don't need to take responsibility for my living arrangements. I won't ask you to come home anymore. I'll proceed with the divorce according to the established process. I folded the letter and placed it alongside the confession letter from our anniversary night. No reply. The independent review lasted 6 weeks. Owen provided payment ledgers, records of file access, and metadata for the various versions of the recording. Leah submitted the playlist for the banquet, admitting that she had assisted in retrieving the files without knowing their contents, and also confirmed that Viola had replaced the files before the banquet. I submitted my resignation email and refund receipts, while refusing to include the North Bay Rehabilitation Center's unpaid visitor records in the public materials. The review committee verified the information only within the scope of confidentiality. Viola did not deny the editing. She said, the full recording was too long, the presentation at the banquet had to be condensed. Owen turned to the list of edits. The condensation removed all content permitting early termination, as well as the statement in which Ivy refused to exploit Grant's dependency. That doesn't change her contract. No, said Owen, nor does it make your version the complete record. Viola also said that the release of the follow-up materials was in response to reputational risks. The committee asked her why she provided details of Grant's recovery to the statement's drafters, why she was still prepared to release the statement after Grant's written objection, and whether the review of the lake house permit was related to his refusal to adopt the statement. Each question was timestamped. She couldn't brush it off with a simple, for the family. I wasn't present on the day the results were delivered. Viola's co-trustee authority has been suspended, and control of the archives has been immediately transferred to an independent office. She has stepped back from Lake Manor affairs and is undergoing further security vetting. Until the vetting is complete, she may not participate in any discretionary allocations or residency permit decisions. This isn't a dramatic scene where the victor is driven out of Bellevue Bay. She still retains her property and social connections, and she hasn't apologized to me. She has simply lost the portion of her authority used to dictate others' choices. Leah sent me a message. The decision has taken effect. I'm sorry about what happened on anniversary night. I replied, thank you for submitting the record. We didn't become friends because of this. Grant didn't reconcile with Viola either. He moved into an accessible apartment on the north side of the harbor, choosing his own furniture, care services, and commute route for the first time. During his first week there, he had a flare-up of pain and sat on the kitchen floor for 40 minutes. He looked at my number on his phone and finally dialed his professional care contact. The next day, he had the design team readjust the cabinet corners and wrote a work note stating that actual users should not be replaced by standard adaptation solutions. His counseling sessions continued once a week. He later told me all this during mediation, not to prove that he was having a hard time, nor to get me to come back and take care of him. It was simply because we were settling the final joint medical savings account. Are you safe now? I asked. Safe. I have someone to call when I'm in pain. Good. I didn't ask the caregiver's name, didn't check his medication, and didn't remind him that the weather was getting colder. As we left the mediation room, he held the door open for me and asked first, is that okay? I nodded, and only then did he step aside. Just a small thing like that. Yet I cried in the elevator. The property settlement was finalized before winter. I received a fair share of our joint savings and retained the returns on investments I'd made during the marriage, without accepting any additional compensation. The studio got through its toughest 3 months, and the community organization that had cancelled its partnership reached out to Mara again, but she didn't agree right away. Pay the advance first, she said. We trust the contract now. I teased her for holding a grudge. No, she said, I've just been schooled by you guys. I started taking my own pottery commissions and rented a private workspace on the first floor. Harbor Apartments was no longer a temporary refuge. Mara and I signed a 1-year lease. The ceramic cup I'd made for my mother was finally glazed. I didn't sand down the fingerprints on the cup sides, I simply coated the outside with a layer of blue-gray glaze that looked like lake water after the rain. When Grant came to pick up the last box of his personal belongings, we met for 10 minutes at the mediation center. The box contained his old ties, 2 design portfolios, and a black coffee pot that I'd accidentally packed in. This is yours, I said. It's ours. My hand paused on the lid of the box. He immediately corrected himself, sorry. It's already been allocated to you on the list of joint property. If you don't want it, you can get rid of it. You like it. You don't have to keep it for me just because I like it. I looked at him for a moment, then put the coffee pot back on my side. Then I'll keep it. Okay. He didn't seem disappointed, nor did he use the opportunity to bring up other topics. As he walked to the door, he turned back and said, next week is the final confirmation. If you'd rather not meet in person, I can sign it in writing. In writing, then. Okay. The divorce took effect on the day of the first snowfall. There were no court battles, and neither of us had second thoughts at the last minute. The mediation center sent the confirmation documents, and I signed the last page at the dining table in my apartment. The wedding ring had been held by the mediation center the whole time. A staff member asked if I wanted to return it, sell it, or pick it up. Return it to Grant. I thought for a moment, then changed my mind. No, mail it to me. It was an item explicitly assigned to me in the division of marital property. How I chose to handle it was my decision, I didn't need his approval. After receiving the ring, I put it in a drawer. I didn't wear it, nor did I throw it away. That afternoon, I went to Cedar Pier alone. The public boardwalk had just been cleared of snow, and the lake was so gray that I couldn't see the far shore. 8 years ago, Grant asked me here if we could stop meeting at the times my grandmother had arranged. He said, I don't have any appointments tomorrow. Will you still come? I replied, I'll come. That was our first real date. But looking back now, neither of us was completely free. I had just finished my contract and was carrying a secret. He depended on my care, backed by the lake house and everything the family provided. I stood at the end of the pier for a long time and took out my phone. Grant's number was still there. I typed, the divorce is final. I deleted it. I wrote again, I'm at Cedar Pier. I deleted that, too. Finally, I sent this. If you're free Saturday afternoon, I'd like to buy you a cup of coffee. Just a cup of coffee, no talk of getting back together, and no assumption that we'll meet again. You can choose where to go. He replied 7 minutes later. I'm free. Is Cedar Pier okay? I stared at those words, the cold wind stinging the tip of my nose. Sure. On Saturday, Grant arrived 5 minutes early. He didn't bring flowers. He only had 2 drinks in his hands, one sugar-free, the other with cinnamon. I didn't know which one you drink these days, he said, so I didn't pick one for you. You don't have to take either. I took the one with cinnamon. I've always drunk this one. I didn't know. Now you do. We walked slowly along the pier. His pace was steadier than it had been 8 years ago, and he had a better sense of when to stop. I didn't reach out to steady him. He stopped by a bench and asked if I'd like to sit for a while. Sure. He told me the kitchen in his new apartment had been remodeled 3 times, and that he'd recently been designing a bathroom for an elderly person living alone. I told him the new kiln at the studio kept tripping the circuit breaker at the highest temperature, and that Mara insisted it apologize for the 2 batches of cups that were lost. How does a kiln apologize? He asked. By burning fewer pieces. Grant laughed. We didn't talk about every wound from the past 7 years. A cup of coffee wasn't enough time, nor should it have been. As I was leaving, he asked, "Can I invite you out again?" "You can invite me. You don't have to say yes." "Right. Next week, the pottery exhibition?" "Let me think about it." He nodded. "Okay." I walked about 10 steps away. When I looked back, he was still standing where he'd been, but he didn't come after me. Grant. I'll go. Our second romance began slowly. So slowly that nothing could be mistaken for payback. We lived and worked separately. We had to ask to meet, and we didn't need to make up excuses to cancel. Grant never hid his pain to see if I'd notice, and I no longer made arrangements for him before he even furrowed his brow. Once, outside a restaurant, he was in too much pain to keep walking and asked me, "Would you mind holding my cane for me?" I said I would. That was the only thing I did. When the ambulance arrived, I went home on my own. I didn't go with him, and I didn't feel cruel for leaving. The next day, he sent a message. He was feeling better. "Thanks for your help last night." It wasn't, "I'm so glad you were there." I stared at the screen and smiled for a long time. I've also learned to say what I need. On the anniversary of my mother's death, I told him I didn't want to be alone, nor did I want to be comforted. I just wanted someone to be with me while I took a series of photos of that ceramic cup. He asked, "Can I come over?" "Sure." He came to the studio, adjusted 2 lights, and did nothing else. After the shoot, I handed him the bluish-gray ceramic cup. "Now you know why I don't celebrate my birthday." "I know. You can ask me. How do you want to celebrate this year?" "By eating the lopsided cake Mara picked out from the clearance bin." "That sounds like a high standard." "You can pay for it, but you can't interfere with the choice." "Deal." Mara later admitted that Grant had changed, but insisted on adding, "Just because he's changed doesn't mean you have to marry him." "I know." "Does he know?" "He knows better than you do." A year later, Grant asked me at Cedar Pier if I'd marry him again. He didn't get down on one knee, nor did he pull out a ring. "You can say no now, or you can say no later," he said. "I'm asking because I want to build a new marriage with you, separate bank accounts, separate jobs, and a written agreement on shared expenses. You're not my caregiver, and I'm not your compensation project." Sounds like a new contract. He was silent for a moment. "Then let me rephrase that." I smiled. "No need. Contracts aren't wrong, it's the secrecy and control that are." I took the old wedding ring out of my pocket. "This time, I'll pick the flowers for the wedding." "What kind of flowers?" "Not white roses." He smiled too, but his eyes were red. "So, what's your answer?" "Yes." The second wedding ceremony was small. Mara and Laya served as witnesses. Owen didn't come, nor did Jonah. Viola received the invitation but didn't attend. Her power of attorney had finally been formally revoked, and she maintained a polite yet distant relationship with Grant. After the ceremony, we didn't return to the Lake Villa. That house still belonged to the trust and had nothing to do with our marriage. I went back to my apartment to retrieve the bluish-gray ceramic cup, and Grant was waiting for me downstairs. The rain fell on the eaves, just as heavily as it had the night I left the Lake Villa. He didn't send a car, nor did he hold an umbrella for me. He just stood there in the rain and asked, "Are we going to your place tonight, or mine?" I placed the cup in his hand. "Let's go to Cedar Pier first." Now. Now. It's raining. I know. 8 years ago, a contract brought me to him. 6 months later, I walked toward him of my own free will for the first time. 7 years later, it took us an entire divorce to remove money, housing, guilt, and marital status from our options, one by one. Rainwater trickled down Grant's temple. He stood there, not rushing me, simply waiting for my next words. I reached out my hand to him. "Grant, are you still willing to go with me?" He took my hand and asked, "Are you sure?" "I'm sure." This time, no one was planning our tomorrow for us.